painted a scene 2 times with 2 different surfaces. This one was on Bristol board, which isn't even made for wet media, and I used a fairly dry gouache, but not very thick. This one was very watery gouache on a mat of acrylic paint. The acrylic paint I used was a chalk paint, matte finish, no prep acrylic paint. I'm going to work thicker. All right, so I'm still using my glass palette over here. This is a porcelain piece that I got at IKEA last year, and so I really like how it I can mix on it, lift the colors up. Now when I'm working on a thick board like this, I already painted the edges black. You can pretty much lay the paint on the surface and just add the paint to it and mix it in. Matter of fact, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to forget. I'm not even going to try to layer. I'm going to just do it thick, like it's an impasto painting. All right, I'm going to add a little white there first because it's a lighter blue than the mountain in front of it. This is a little exaggerated. I don't want it. I'll just see what I can do. Okay, that's too blue. See what happens when I don't want a little more. Okay. Kind of let it disappear, kind of mix in with the clouds, and that gets it further away. I'll just continue that. I need a little water in my brush, not too much. See, now you're starting to hear it. I want it a little juicier than that. Pick up a chunk of paint here. That's going to make it too green probably, but we'll just see what happens. If I'm working outside, gouache dries so fast, and I would continually spritz my palette with a spray bottle or drop in colors from a pipette. All right. As it gets closer, it gets warmer and a little brighter. Add a little more light to that. I don't always want to pick up just white. And most of the time I'm painting gouache, I'm painting in my journal, and I'm not using as juicy of a paint, but it's not flowing quite like this either because I'm trying to go a little lighter on the thickness, and I can't drag across a piece of paper. I don't feel like I can on this surface. So kind of like that. Pick up a little bit of burnt sienna. No, excuse me, that was not burnt sienna. That is yellow ochre. Not very fluid yellow ochre. This is kind of a latte color. It is definitely not straight out of the tube. That's actually further down. I'll just wipe it off. Wet it. See, it's nice that I can do that with with a gessoed panel. Too much water and it's going to bead up. I'll come back to that. Almost put it in the same place. Oh well. Want a little more blue-green. I'm having a hard time going straight to the painting. I said I was going to try to go, even when I paint oils, I mix over to the side. That's too bright. There, that's better. And I like that other color kind of already under there, so I can just kind of scumble it in. That's too much the same color. I drag a little bit of some blue and some lighter tones in there. And I can always add this again later. I want that a little bluer back there. There's fields, farming, and all sorts of things going on back there. Okay, getting up closer. I'm gonna go ahead and make that a little more. Well, I need to stir that up again. I left to go to a meeting and I forgot to close it up, and it's gotten stiff again. See how that's, and I really don't want to get out brand new paint. Just wet it again. Let it sit there for a minute, reactivate. It'll wake back up. See, wow, doesn't take much. Now, I did not check this board to make sure it was really clean. I'm kind of getting a beat-it up effect on part of it, or it might just be I'm scraping too hard. I'll come back, figure it out. There's some of that color over here. Some of this color up in the tree that comes in that direction. I'll cover that up with some darker tones in a bit. It's very light in there, right in through here. It's very light, and it's very light on the road. I want it even lighter than that. That's pretty much the lightest part of the painting. And then it goes into grass. And I'm going to see if I can mix it. Woo! Way too green. Should not go in with the dirty brush into a bright yellow and make it dirty. That's too bright. Kind of takes away from everything else, but whoop, sorry. I'm also trying to go fairly quick. What would I do if I was outside, kind of thing. I'm going to ignore the trees, the shrubbery that was at the very front on this one, and see if I like the composition any better. I want some dark green this time. I'm not going to go straight on the palette. I'm going to come over here and start, well, with black. Add some green to that. Ooh, there went my picture. There is a lot of really darks. I'm going to come back and lay in some of the other color first. Kind of want it to look like foliage, but I don't want it to look like anything specific at this point. I really like the road better here. I'm going to move it over again. Hopefully that won't mess me up. Gouache, you can do light over dark, dark over light. I'm going to make this back here a little lighter blue. I'm going to pull it down to make that road a little lower. All right, I like that. I like that better. And while I have, again, this is an inexpensive brush, or I wouldn't be doing this. I pick up a little of the green. Add a little purple to that. Purple has red in it, which is the opposite of green. And that's not really a green, necessarily a green tree. It is, but has other colors in it too. All right, we're going to just create some foliage on this edge, some foliage in here. I need the white mixed in to some of that. I put in the tall trees before I totally lose track of where things are. I do like the background. Don't know if I like anything else. Oh, well, let me at least put a thin, okay, see, look what thin does on gouache, on gesso board. It's got to be thick enough. Not too much water or it was beaten up. Wonder if the board wasn't quite clean. Not sure. Okay, because in here it's definitely a lot darker. And these trees will be coming up out of it. I know y'all probably think I've totally lost it. I probably have. Okay, I'm going to have this one. I didn't want it to go right at the tip of that mountain, and I'm going to not necessarily, this is my inspiration. I am not obviously going strictly by it. Just want to get a feel for where I am. All right, you see how cool that is? How that covers when you have it thick enough? A little bit of green, a little bit of black, a little bit of purple. Put another one in back here that's thinner, skinnier. It's not going to be as tall. Let's see. It'll come in front of this other tree. Stop at that right in there. You kind of do a dry brush effect with this thick stuff and just kind of lay in where some other shrubs and things may be. As you see, it does dry lighter than what you first put down. There's a little bitty tree right there. Next one's a little taller. I'll make that one just a little bigger. Need to there's one real close to it, but further down. And then it's going to be a little taller. This will help with the depth. Starts further down on the page, or the closer it is to you, the further down it is. Some of them are not quite as skinny. We'll come back and adjust that some in just a minute. I think I'll put this one, make this one about the same height, a tad bit, but I'm going to make it a little wider. Well, I want it a little bigger anyway because it's getting closer to me. And I'm letting the brush kind of do the work. I just tilt it slightly at different angles so that it creates the illusion of the branches. Again, a tiny bit of black. When you're starting with dark, you start with black and then just add color to it, then it'll be a lot more on the dark side than if you just start with the purer color. Can't be any darker than it is in the palette unless you add black to it. Now this one will be further down on the mountain, a little behind this one, or on the hillside, I guess. I don't know if you'd call that a mountain. You might. Or I'll just pull it around this way. We'll just pretend that the road maybe continues here, curves and then continues there. Let's try that. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so I'm going to go back with the white. I usually always have two whites in my palette, one for pure white and one for mixing. And you see I did not clean my brush very well. There's a lot of green in it. Don't worry, I'm going to come back and do something to that tree in a little bit. Okay, there's already color there, so I'm just going to take the white and drag it where it is. If I work the white and wet what's underneath it, if the white was really wet, it would not cover very well, and the color underneath would kind of bleed through. I'm just going to do it like this, even though that's not what I see in the picture. I want a little bit of brown, a little bit of this latte color to tone that down just a tad. It's really cold outside. We're here today. It started off this morning, it was 44, and the temperature is going to drop throughout the day, so it's just going to get colder, and that's okay. All right, so now I'm into the countryside where I have some dried grasses and I don't know what all, a variety of shrubbery in through here. I gotta fix this other tree before it drives me total bonkers. See, that's really hard lines. So I just wet my brush. It's lightly damp, and I'm gonna come back and tap on what I've done there. Not the tree in the front, but the one in the back, just to kind of move it to the. Oops, don't want to drop a drop. Okay, anyway. So. Okay, see, now I look at my picture and that green wasn't so bad. That's all right. I want to add a little more dirt back here to that area. And it moves into the grass. And this is where I think you just look and see what you have there. Get a different mix, a different green. Think about cools are more in the distance. Warmer greens are up front. They don't even have to totally make sense. And you should step away from your work. I haven't stepped away from this to see how it's looking. Trying to film and hold my camera up so I can see the picture at the same time. I feel like I need at least one of those trees over here. I'm not sure about that. Road, that hill. I'm going to soften it a bit, especially in the distance. There are other trees. If you want to add other trees and you don't want them to be very obvious, you can get runnier paint. I think I'm going to do that back here, where you're using it as kind of a filler. It covers up a little bit, but not everything. If you want it to mix in with what's underneath, then you tap it more. don't want it quite so dark on the back side. See, there's a really light shrub right there that's getting light. I don't have that in at all. And I'm going to put, ooh, that's really light. It's probably too light. I want to add a little bit of light on the side of the tree, but it doesn't need to be that thick. I do fine until I try to start making stuff up, and when I start making stuff up, then I don't do so good. But I thought, well, if I keep trying to paint this image, oops, sorry, my head hit the camera. So I'm going to add a little bit of blue on this side, just for variation, and maybe a little texture. But anyway, I hope it works out. All right, these over here, I'm going to start with the thick foliage, just like I did the dark part of the tree. I'm going to do one right in here. It is a taller tree because it's closer. It's going to go off the front of my canvas, but hopefully it will bring things together. I'm going to mix black and burnt sienna to make a very dark trunk. And they're pretty straight. I'm using the tip end of the brush. That got a little heavier than what I wanted. Just kind of dragging it around. You can do this with a little bitty thin type brush as well. That might not be. I'm comparing the width of it to the trees. Might need to bring some more trees down here to fill this in, since I didn't do them to start with. I think I'll do that. I can have a little better. The wind's picking up. My sheets on the back porch that I have up for curtains are blowing in the wind. I'm going to cover up some of this part that's kind of beating up. All right, and while I have some yellow green, I'm going to add that to the top of these trees on the side where the light is hitting most of it. Part I don't like is this right here. Oh, I haven't put any trunks in anything. Add a few more, little more darker foliage in here. Kind of the illusion of a terrace where it's a drop down, and there's some more plants in here. Pick up some blue, more of a bluey shadow, and a little bit of highlights where the sun's hitting it. Again, I might be adding too much. And add a little bit up here. Really like the warmth of the yellow more so than the lighter green. All right. I need something to cross over this. It was too much of a line. Oops. And there's shadows that cross over this road. So I'm just going to exaggerate those. It's going to get less here and brighter in the middle. It was too much of a line, and I didn't like it. It also took me off the page. So this one is more, like I said, painted. If I was doing it in oils, it'd be similar to this. That I don't know if you can see. That blue is really blue. When you layer gouache, the last layer kind of sticks on top. It doesn't sink in and become transparent like watercolor. So if you see, I just lifted off that. Shouldn't have done that. If my brush is probably too wet. If you touch several things can happen. See, my brush is too dry. Hello, my brush is too wet. So if my brush is too wet and I'm working on a hard surface and I hit the paint over and over on that surface, then I'm going to lift off that paint instead of mixing it. Oh goodness, I might have to let it dry. So you keep noodling with it, you're going to end up picking it up somewhere. I think I have a little bit of white paint too, so that's not helping. All right, I'm going to hit that with a hairdryer and then come back and see if, oh, I do need to do one other thing. See, I painted all that with that one brush. Don't force yourself to use just one brush. I usually paint the trunks and small distant branches with this brush. I really like this brush. It's Calia liner. Now, that needs to be dry. Hopefully it will be. Yeah, there it is. If it wasn't, then that would blur out. So having just a little bit of definition in the foliage here is helpful. Don't overdo it. It's easy to overdo. And while I'm working on the foliage, I'm going to come back to this white. I don't want it pure white or a harsh white, so I'm getting it more fluid. And hitting a little bit of these tree trunks. Some of them were actually fairly light on their own. I also play a little bit with it sometimes. This is watery, pretty watery, so I can put it up here knowing that if it's watery enough, it's going to sink down into what's there. Of course, I'm playing with it, and that kind of forces it too. If I want to lighten it just a little bit, I have more water in my brush. If I want to soften that just a little bit, I think the lines are a little too harsh, I can just go back over and lightly tap on them. Break that up just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to quit. Now, as soon as I said that, this right here, I don't like how that stops where that is dark blue in the background. So I'm going to raise that tree up just ever so slightly. And once that's dry, I can come back, tap on it a little bit more, and make that darker. Okay, now I'm going to take it off this. I see it now, that blob You see that blob of brown when I was painting with a larger brush? I'm going to see if I can correct that with a little bit of bluish white. Why bluish white? Because that's kind of what's in the background. So I'm painting the negative spaces between the trunks. It's a little too white, but when I get away from it, a little too white. We'll blue it down a little bit. Blue it down a little bit. Can't thin it too much, or guess what I get? If I thin it too much, I pull up the green or the brown. Let me get the brown. Ooh, had a big drop on the end. That would have been a big mistake. Okay, what I don't like, I lighten that too much to where now it's the value of the mountains in the background. Oh gosh. Okay, here we go again. I'm going to darken the chunks of the trees. I can go back to what I originally started with, the green, a little bit of black, a little bit of violet, purple. I'm not sure what color that is. And let's reestablish the darks of those trees. I really overdid it and lost it. Should have a little more water in it. Barely, but not much. Oh, I picked up no wonder. I picked up this really stiff, I've even chopped it. It used to be a longer bristle, but it broke. Or I messed it up. I cut it off because it was frayed so much at the end. And I could add another tree. Do I need another tree here? Kind of do. Oh, why not? All right. This one is going to also be going off the page. Off the page at the side and at the top. Ooh, that's too yellow. You'll hear the dogs. Our neighbors have dogs and they yap way more than I want them to. I added yellow ochre. I'm going to let it be in front of that tree. You can do bigger chunks. It's getting too light already. Probably should change brushes. That would probably be helpful. This one's so stiff, it's kind of breaking. All right, where's that little one I had a minute ago? There it is. Okay. Get that dark brown, a little bit of the black. Come back and reestablish some of these that are in the shadow a little bit more. And then these I'll bring down. There are some that are in the sunshine. I get a little more white on my brush. Bright, but pretty bright. Oh, I need to tone that down a little bit before I do too much with it. Put it in this violet. So I'll make a tint of white. Probably can't tell, but it is better. Okay, I'm going to pick this bright green up over here. And I'm squinting to see where the brightest greens are. There's some in here. A little bit up in the trees. The thing I have to be careful with, I want this tree to read as though it's in front of the mountain in the background. That mountain in the background is too warm right there. So I need to cool it down just a bit. I'm going to try to do it with this little brush and do a light glaze of kind of a, oh, I have to do too many strokes. Let's see. It needs to be a fairly soft brush. If you're going to do a glaze, you don't want to wake up the colors underneath. All right, I'm going to do this. Whoops. Not that one. The one that was next to it. Okay, it's still thin, soft. And if it's too wet, and it's going to be pretty wet. Now, see, that's just waking up what's underneath. Okay, let's see. I'll have to mix a thicker paint, pale blue, one on the lighter side, so I'm getting some white. A little bit of green in there, but not a real warm green. I'll see if this will let me lay it down. Picking up, I can't even see it. There we go. Still not happy with that. All right, sometimes you can take a color, you can dab it, you can leave it in, and as it dries, it kind of sinks down into what's underneath. That's what I'm doing with the rest. I'm making that a little bluer in the background. See if, oh, but you got to do it once and leave it alone. You touch it again and you're lifting it up. That's the frustrating part of gouache. And I'm not sure if it would have done that if I hadn't been painting on this slick gesso board. So I'm just bringing some of the blue in the background just to give it a little more atmosphere. I'm going to lighten that blue up just a tad. What I like about it, I love the distant hills. Love that. And I think I'll like the rest when I leave it alone enough.